Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're tackling a question that I'm sure we've all pondered at some point. Does money buy happiness?
It's a classic question, isn't it?
It really is. And today, we're going to be looking at some really interesting research from Knowledge at Wharton, the business journal from the University of Pennsylvania. And let me tell you, the findings are pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah. One of the things I find so interesting about this particular research is how it brought together experts who initially seemed to have completely opposite views.
Yeah, you're right. We're talking about two major studies here. One from way back in 2010 by Princeton researchers Kahneman and Deaton found that happiness increases with income, but only up to about $75,000 a year.
Right?
And then fast forward to 2021, a study by Penn's Matthew Killingsworth seemed to contradict that, showing that happiness just kept rising with income, way past that $75,000 mark.
Right.
So how on earth did these researchers resolve this apparent conflict?
Well, they did something called an adversarial collaboration,
Oh, cool.
which is a fancy way of saying they teamed up to figure out why their results were so different.
Interesting.
They brought in a Penn professor named Barbara Mellers to kind of make sense of it all.
Okay.
And what's really fascinating here is that the 2010 study, the one that found the plateau, wasn't really measuring general happiness.
Oh, really?
It was more focused on identifying unhappiness.
I mean, how did they figure that out? It seems like happiness and unhappiness would be two sides of the same coin, right?
Not necessarily. It's kind of like, think of it like a test designed to detect like cognitive decline.
Okay.
So if everyone taking the test scores perfectly, because they're all cognitively healthy,
Right.
the test wouldn't tell you much about the general intelligence of the group.
Okay. Yeah.
It's really good at spotting problems, but not so much at measuring overall cognitive ability.
So the 2010 study was really good at finding those who were unhappy, but not as good at measuring the happiness of everyone else.
Exactly. And when they revisited the data from the 2021 study with this new understanding, some really interesting nuances kind of popped up.
Okay. I'm on the edge of my seat here. What did they find?
Well, what they found was that for most people, more money does seem to correlate with greater happiness, but there is a subset of people, even among the wealthy, for whom happiness seems to plateau after an income of about $100,000.
Interesting.
And what's particularly interesting is that this relationship between money and happiness seems to vary depending on a person's existing level of emotional well-being.
Oh, wow. So it's not as simple as saying money buys happiness or money doesn't buy happiness.
Exactly. It's much more nuanced than that.
Okay.
In fact, for individuals who are already very happy, the association between happiness and income seems to actually accelerate above that $100,000 mark.
Whoa, that's pretty surprising. So for those who are already feeling good, more money can actually boost their happiness even further. What about folks who aren't as happy to begin with?
Well, for the least happy, happiness tends to rise with income, but then it kind of levels off after reaching that $100,000 mark.
Okay.
And for those kind of in the middle range of emotional well-being, happiness just increases kind of steadily with income.
Okay, so we're seeing different patterns depending on where someone falls on that happiness spectrum.
Mhm.
This adversarial collaboration was really helpful in clarifying this. So what really stood out to you about their approach and their findings?
Well, to me, what's remarkable is that these researchers, instead of just digging their heels in and clinging to their initial positions, they were willing to really challenge their own assumptions and actually work together to arrive at, a more comprehensive understanding.
Yeah.
And I think their findings really emphasize that this relationship between money and happiness is far more complex than we might initially think.
It's a great reminder that in science, and in life really, sometimes the most interesting discoveries come from being open to different perspectives and really kind of digging deeper into the nuances.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that there isn't always a simple answer and being open to the idea that maybe, the truth is a little more complicated than we originally thought.
So we've established that money can play a role in happiness, but it's definitely not the whole picture. What other factors do you think are important to consider when we're talking about happiness and well-being?
That's a great question. And it's one that researchers in the field of positive psychology have been exploring for years. Turns out there are a number of elements that contribute to, a fulfilling, happy life, and a lot of them actually have very little to do with how much money we have in the bank.
Okay.
That's really interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into those other factors there. What are some of those key ingredients for a happy and fulfilling life besides having a healthy bank balance? So let's dive into those other factors then. What are some of those key ingredients for a happy and fulfilling life besides having a healthy bank balance?
Well, for starters, having strong social connections is
Mm.
absolutely crucial. Humans are social creatures by nature.
Yeah,
And having those close, supportive relationships with family and friends and loved ones, it's really essential for our well-being.
that makes a lot of sense. Having people in your life that you can laugh with, confide in, rely on, I mean, that can make a world of difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
And it's not just about the quantity of those relationships, right? It's about the quality. It's about nurturing those connections, being present with the people you care about, offering support when they need it.
So, strong relationships, check. What else?
Another important factor is having a sense of purpose.
Mm.
And this can be related to your career, your hobbies, maybe volunteer work, anything that gives you a sense of meaning, makes you feel like you're making a positive contribution to the world.
Yeah, it's about feeling like you're a part of something bigger than yourself, that your actions have value and impact.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be some grand world-changing mission or anything. It's about finding something that you're passionate about that gives you a sense of direction and fulfillment.
I love that. So, strong relationships, a sense of purpose, anything else,
Of course, we can't forget about physical and mental health,
right?
taking care of your body, through exercise, healthy eating, getting enough sleep. These things can have a huge impact on your overall well-being.
Yeah.
And managing stress, practicing mindfulness, seeking professional help when needed. All of these things are crucial for mental well-being.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah,
Taking care of ourselves so we can show up as our best selves for, the people and the things that matter most to us.
precisely. And it's important to remember that happiness isn't a destination, it's a journey. There will be ups and downs, challenges and triumphs. It's about kind of embracing the full spectrum of human experience and finding joy in those everyday moments.
Well said. And that kind of ties back to our discussion about money, right? Even if we reach a certain income level, if we're not appreciating those simple things in life, will we truly be happy?
That's a great point. Contentment isn't about having everything. It's about appreciating what you do have.
So before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today.
Okay. So we started by diving into the complex relationship between money and happiness.
Yeah.
Learn that it's not a simple equation. More money can contribute to happiness for a lot of people, but it's not a guarantee, and the impact can really vary depending on your existing level of emotional well-being.
Right. And we talked about adversarial collaborations, how they can help lead to, more nuanced and comprehensive understandings of really complex issues.
Yeah.
And then we shifted gears a little bit and considered those other crucial elements of a fulfilling life, right? Strong relationships, a sense of purpose, and taking care of our physical and mental health. And perhaps most importantly, we were reminded that happiness is a journey, not a destination, and that it often lies in appreciating those simple things, finding joy in those everyday moments.
Yeah, it's about cultivating that sense of gratitude for what we have and focusing on those aspects of life that bring us true fulfillment.
You mentioned earlier that the research we discussed could have implications for things like tax policies and employee compensation. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. So if we know that the impact of money on happiness really varies depending on a person's existing level of emotional well-being, it raises some really interesting questions about how we structure things like income tax brackets.
I see what you mean. If someone is already struggling to make ends meet, an extra, let's say, $1,000 could make a huge difference in their overall happiness. But for somebody who's already financially secure, that same amount might not even register.
Exactly. So it begs the question, should our tax policies be taking these nuances into account? Should we be thinking about how to create a system that promotes not just economic growth, but also overall well-being?
That's a really interesting thought. And what about employee compensation? How could these findings inform the way companies approach things like salaries and benefits?
Well, it suggests that maybe just focusing on increasing salaries might not be the most effective way to boost employee happiness. It might be more beneficial to think about a more holistic approach, that considers things like work-life balance, opportunities for personal growth, a supportive work environment.
Right, because if someone is constantly stressed and overworked, even a really big paycheck might not be enough to compensate for their unhappiness.
Exactly. And it really highlights the importance of creating a workplace culture that values employee well-being and recognizes that happiness can be influenced by a wide range of factors.
It seems like these findings could also have implications for individuals as they navigate their own career choices as well.
Absolutely. If you're thinking about a career change or even just negotiating a new salary, It's worth reflecting on how those decisions might impact not just your financial situation, but also, your overall happiness and well-being.
So instead of chasing the highest paying job, it might be more fulfilling to consider things like work-life balance, company culture, and opportunities for personal and professional growth.
Exactly. It's about finding a career that aligns with your values and your interests and your goals, not just your bank account.
That's such an important point. I think we often get so caught up in this idea that success is measured solely by how much money we make.
It's a common misconception.
Right.
But true success encompasses so much more than just financial wealth. It's about finding that fulfillment in our work, nurturing meaningful relationships, and just living a life that is aligned with our values.
Speaking of those other aspects of a fulfilling life, earlier we talked about the importance of strong relationships, having a sense of purpose, and those things related to physical and mental health. Are there any specific strategies or practices people can kind of incorporate into their lives to cultivate those things?
Oh, absolutely. There are so many things that people can do to foster these aspects of well-being. When it comes to relationships, it's all about making time for the people who matter most, being present with them, offering support when it's needed. It's also about, nurturing new connections and building a community of people who share your values and interests.
So it's not just about maintaining the relationships that we have, but it's also being open to forming new ones as well.
Exactly. And when it comes to finding that sense of purpose, it's often about exploring your passions, right? Figuring out how you can use your unique talents and skills to make a positive contribution to the world. And this might involve, volunteering your time, pursuing a creative hobby, or finding a career that aligns with your values.
So it's about identifying what lights you up and then finding ways to kind of incorporate that into your life, right?
Exactly. And as for physical and mental health, there are countless strategies that people can employ. Regular exercise, a balanced diet, adequate sleep, these are all essential for physical well-being. And practices like mindfulness, meditation, spending time in nature can have really profound benefits for mental health.
It sounds like there's a lot we can do to kind of take charge of our own well-being, even if we're not quite where we want to be financially yet. It's encouraging to know that happiness isn't entirely dependent on those external factors like income.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that we have agency, in shaping our own happiness. We can choose to cultivate gratitude and focus on our strengths and build a life that is rich in meaning and connection, regardless of our financial circumstances.
You've given us so much to think about today. I especially appreciate that emphasis on taking a holistic approach to happiness, considering not just our finances, but also our relationships, our purpose, our well-being.
It's about understanding that, true happiness is multifaceted. And by nurturing these various aspects of our lives, we can create a more fulfilling and joyful existence.
I think that's a wonderful message to leave our listeners with. It's a reminder that happiness is within our reach and that it often lies in appreciating those simple things and focusing on those aspects of life that truly matter.
And it's an ongoing journey, of discovery and growth. We can continually learn and evolve and find new ways to cultivate joy and meaning in our lives.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, we hope this exploration of money and happiness has sparked some new ideas and inspired you to consider what truly brings you joy and fulfillment. Remember, happiness is a journey, not a destination. So keep exploring, keep growing, and keep diving deep into the things that matter most to you.